Welcome, guys, to another episode of Electrical Theology, Esoteric Life Coaching. Appreciate you showing up for another episode. If you're new to the channel, definitely like, subscribe. That way you have and hit the notification bell, so whatever's coming up, you'll be alerted immediately. And basically what I teach is esoteric knowledge. And right now we're just at the foundational grounds. There's about another 30 videos you can watch about getting our feet wet, if you will, into the cosmic stream of knowledge. Now, before we can go out to the cosmic streams, we make sure our foundation here on Earth is pretty solid. And the way we are able to keep a solid foothold in our everyday life is understanding communications, which is today's episode. Right? That communication styles, and why I say that, as we know, that is the preformed, the unformed, the pre-knowledge, the pre-consciousness, and it's a neutral field, if you will, just to put some term to it. It's like a car wash. You go in with a dirty car, and then you go through the car wash, and you come out with a clean car. And so basically, that is a cosmic car wash, and it takes what's within our vehicle. And when we're done with it, we release this dirt that's built up over time on us and our thoughts and emotions on ourselves. And some people may call this karma. I look at karma as a sticky substance that all you have to do is just start taking responsibility for your thoughts, actions, and emotions, but also understanding where your thoughts come from, who's in charge of those thoughts, and who is taking the action that you're taking. You are, for whatever your reasons. Call them self-defensive, offensive, defensive, whatever this may be, they're still your actions. Right? And this isn't about blame or fault. Those are in the psychological realm. We deal in the esoteric realm. And the esoteric realm is learning how to commune with the energy that is, the energy that's within inside you, the energy that is everything. Everything is made up of electricity, right? And the byproducts of electromagnetism. And it trickles down into energy within certain realms of spirituality, metaphysics, paranormal, stuff like this. Anyway, that's what our channel is about, guys. And today we're going to continue on with communication styles. And as we always see, that energy is communicating with ions, which in itself, we are ions, so we're communicating with ourselves. And that's what our foundational steps are, is to learn how to communicate with ourselves. Then we can communicate with other people, places, and things around us. Then we can go off-world. And now that we have a good resource and source, is just we continually tap into the source code, the source of the universe, and we can take any information we have. When we're done with it, when we've extracted what we want, we then send it through the car wash, if you will, and then it cleanses it up, and then our energy are in essence demagnetized and ready to be remagnetized or reattracted or put in order according to your thoughts that you are taking responsibility for. All right? So we've been talking about the realms, right? This is sort of the hierarchy realms. We are talking within the God realm or the mental realms. So this is the chemical realm where we start putting mixing a lot of this stuff together. So we dealt with 1 through 7, now we're with 8 through 14, in which we dealt with strength last episode, and we started talking about deep listening and communication. So if you've ever wanted to know how to communicate properly and understand what other people are saying and not trying to be right or wrong or trying to fix people, then we can finally be a very balanced and neutral communicator. That doesn't mean to be boring, it means we're very inquisitive. But when it comes to communicating with other people, we have to create a rapport, which is a rap and pour. Rap meaning our words, and port meaning our portals. So this is the preface, right? The preface to showing up in the galactic neighborhood and being able to communicate and establish or reestablish disconnected communications. Right? We all came from somewhere, and we came from this outer space, and we then fit the outer space into our inner space. And that's the esoteric. So today we're dealing with really looking at a close reflection of ourselves. We want to reflect those ions, how they're coming in, look at them, and being however they show up in a person, place, or thing, up in our thoughts, actions, and emotions, right? Then we can deal with them. right? So basically we are here in the reflection stage, because at this point we're fused in with everyone else's ions, and that's where we get the confusion, which is just con meaning with, fuse, right? Fuse is electrical. It is what connects one side of electricity to another side, and if there's too much charge on one side or the other, it can cause the breaker, if you will, or the fuse to break. And that's why in your house you have fuses and breakers, because if the energy is too much, it breaks the connection. So throughout our evolution as humans, and now beginning to integrate with the collective back and being responsible for our thoughts, actions, and emotions, then we then can have counsel with those outside of Earth and other dimensions. Right? But if we cannot have proper communications here on Earth with our friends, families, neighbors, and all that good stuff, then you're not going to be able to do it, because the same way you have communications here and who you are now is how you'll have communications out there. But out there, it's a little more electrically powerful out there. And if you don't take the responsibility for those thoughts, actions, and emotion, then the energy and motion that's coming in is going to break or confuse you. So with this confusion, when you get this confusion, and we have all gotten this confusion, we've been disconnected from the higher source, or the higher frequencies, or the hierarchies, or the gods, or all that good stuff. So we're just reconnecting with our higher self, and this reflection is what we have to do when we become confused. I have a longer program that's about 400 pages of this stuff, a keynote, and I'm just pulling some of that from this, because yesterday we talked about strength and deep communications, and today is just a continuation of that deep communication, but moving into how do we reflect and how do we learn to communicate with ourselves, right? Now, because this is probably going to be long, I'm going to break this communication video into probably 3 of them, because it will be long, so I'm going to keep them a lot shorter, because this could go on for an hour or so. So I'll break it down into 3 videos, part 1, 2, and 3. This is part 1 that we're on. And so our communication equals our resources. So if you don't have a lot of resources of how to communicate, then that's how your communication is going to be. So if you're finding that you're not getting equal communication, or having people understand you, or you understanding other people's perspectives, doesn't mean we have to like or dislike it. It means that we just need to understand, right? Because that's part of our hierarchy, which is discipline, knowledge, understanding, awareness, right? So we're in the understanding stage still in this communication. We need to understand how we communicate so we can understand how other people communicate. And communication is not about being right or wrong. So this is sort of a rephrasing the communication, or acknowledging what other people are saying. So we have the next videos that we'll be talking about are truths, how to establish rapport, relationships, how our communication determines our relationship. So whatever your ability is to communicate, or how in depth or how your deep communications are, then that's going to determine how deep of relationships you have, and how you can relate to other people's ships electrically, magnetically, amplitude, all that stuff we talked about in past videos. So if you cannot communicate properly here, then you can't communicate with what's outside of here, right? So again, we're just building a rapport with ourselves, right? Wrapping the port. We're getting ready to communicate, wrap and communicate, same word, talk, verse, it's all the same word. And we're going to communicate. So this is a trial where we can start reconnecting and being able to communicate with those outside our realm, or on actual ships out in space, right, or different realms, right? Now that may sound weird to some, but you know what, people? There's a billion planets and galaxies, and if you think we're the only ones out here, that's your perspective. Which again, that's how you're going to communicate, and then you'll end up always arguing or trying to prove your point to other people. And we'll get into the different styles of limited communication. Right? Again, no one's communication is right or wrong. It's just what kind of communication do you want? Do you want a deep trust with other people? Do you want to be open-hearted and undefended? Or do you want to be defensive, deflective, a persecutor, right? Or any other style. So unhealthy, we're going to get into that word itself, unhealthy, here in a minute, but there's unhealthy thinking styles, and unhealthy is not what you think it is, because that's a psychological term. which can have detriments to your physical body, which is all possible. But we're going to look at unhealthy from a esoteric perspective, right? So we're going to look at these thinking styles and then how to have these mental filters, or understand the mental filters we have of why we're not understanding other people's communications. We talked about the undefended heart a bunch, but it will be part of this slide as well. And then the electrical theology and client relationship. And again, electrical and client is just anyone. I say it because that's what I do for a living. But when you're talking to family and friends, parent to child, employee to boss, contractor to vendor, whatever this communication is that we want to make sure that we're not transferring our own limited communication or resources onto somebody else. Because if we're not getting what we want in this life, it's because you don't have the skills or the abilities or the verse or the words or the vocabulary to get your point across. And when you don't, you get emotional. And then we want to transfer that energy or our biasness or our egos onto other people. Right? And then we'll look at the 7 communications that cause stress. Now, we're not going to get to all this today. Like I said, I'm going to break this up into a few different videos. Right? So rephrase and acknowledgement. So what is rephrasing? You'll hear this word rephrase, reframe, repeat, parrot, all these words in communication. And all of them work to a degree, but you don't want to overuse any one of them. But you also want to use them in deep listening, not just superficial. If you say, I hear what you're saying, that's great. But if it's not genuine or it's not congruent or it's not created a rapport, then that person's not going to even hear those words. They're not going to feel them. And they're not going to acknowledge it because they didn't feel them, because you didn't say it with an open heart. Right? You said it from a rote rehearsal. So anyway, unlike parrot phrasing, rephrasing is the ability derived from deep listening to take what the client said that may have been unclear to you or them and say it another way, but maintaining the perceived essence of the client's meaning. Again, client could be anyone you're communicating with. So, but maintaining a perceived essence of the client's meaning. So we hear what people are saying sometimes, but we're not sure, especially us as the NLP practitioner or the therapist or whatever your role is, parent or whatever, is that we think we may know what they're saying, but if you're not sure immediately, and this is immediacy we'll get into later, but immediately reframe it back to them by simply saying, all right, if I'm hearing you correctly, is this what you meant? Right? All we have to do is just say that simple phrase or something like it, and then have them, and that's a reframe, a rephrase. And then they can then come at it again a different way. So for an example, just like I just gave you this sentence, I'm going to reframe it and just say that when there is a lack of clarity in a communication, meaning that maybe that person's using a word incorrectly, right? Or maybe they used it, maybe you don't know all the meanings of the word and the way in which they're using it. Because again, a lot of my clients are doctors, lawyers, engineers, physicists, blue-collar people, white-collar people. It's a gamut, but each one has their unique way of using vocabulary, right? And we talked about yesterday that the Black Dictionary came out, and I think that's amazing because they use words differently than we do. So they may say a one word, which in another form of communication may say, oh my God, that's bad, that's negative, in which it's not. You know what I'm saying? When I say let's have a bitching good time, I'm not calling anyone anything negative. I'm not calling them a female dog. It's not a derogatory term. It's a fun term. Does that make sense? So miscommunication always happens right when the mouth opens up. And so anyway, we get back to here is that if you are unclear, if something inside you doubts or doesn't understand something, immediately bring it up. Anything. I don't know what anyone means when they open their mouth. So I'm constantly asking questions or questing their energy, right? To have them transfer in a good way, if you will, their meaning back to me. And if I don't understand exactly how they're coming, then I'm going to have them rephrase it in such a way. I'm like, I'm not sure if I understand that. Can you explain it a different way, right? Or something to that. Right? So that basically all this means is to rephrase is just say it a different way, guys. See, I reframed it. I rephrased it. All right, so now why, when we are in communication with other people, we get impressions? Now, these are pressed ions. Energy, when someone speaks, or their body's electromagnetism, or their biomechanical, chemical, electrical bodies, they're all producing waves of energy. And then when we're in close proximity with other people, we can feel that energy. And yes, we can also feel it when we're planets apart. But let's just stick to Earth right now, and people, and our friends, families, and neighbors, and bosses, and all that good stuff. So when everyone's energy is pressing upon anyone else's energy, and if you don't know your own rapport with yourself, then you're not sure whose energy is whose. It's confusion again. You're fusing someone else's energy with yours, and then it's going to lead to miscommunication or projection of egos. So impressions is someone else's energy pressing upon another to where the other person or that feeling said pressure. So basically, when you feel pressure or you feel energy, sound waves coming at your body, and if you have constructed your cells a certain way because you are responsible for those thoughts, actions, and emotions, then however you have programmed yourself and bought into other people's systems, then you're going to hear it through someone else's eyes or ears, right? Even though you're hearing it through your eyes, ears, and senses, you have your impression, but then you're going to default to the tribal position or the societal position or the culture position. Right? So pressure is just amplified waveform energy felt from one force to another, or another person to another. The originated energy before labels and emotions. So basically, we feel the energy and then we like to label it. Right? We have the life experience, life event, and then from that we interpret it. Well, what we're experiencing is the energy that we felt from that. And if you're insecure, then you're going to take everything personally. You think everyone's after you, thus being the victim, thus everyone's a persecutor, then you go seek help from everyone. So you're a perpetual seeker of healing. I don't heal. I got out of that business decades ago because I don't perceive. So if I immediately have the bias that someone comes to me and says, oh, I'm sick, or I have this label on me, someone attached a label and I believe this label, and if I already hear that label and believe that label, then I'm already biased. What I can do is that person is going to bring me their version from their eyes, their story. And it's their story. It's not mine to do anything with other than rephrase back at them and see what it is they want to do and empower them to figure out their own life. Right? So we want to get that person into feeling before they put a label. Or if they have a label, we're going to take the label off and never use that label again. Because then you're hiding behind that label. Right? And society is more than happy to have you continue and perpetuate that label. All right, so when the pressures of impressions persist, right? So if you're around people who have consistent pressures, you're an employee and a boss is yelling at you all the time, or even just the pressures of your own perception of who you are, right? Do you hide behind a label? Do you say, I'm the boss? And now your business got bought out, and now you're no longer the boss, you're just an employee, right? Or junior partner, or whatever this demotion is, right? Demotion is a deceleration of energy and motion. So you've been demoted. Those ions have been demoted. Or they're not moving as they were before. It doesn't mean good or bad or indifferent. It just means that they're not moving like they did before. And if we attach or adhere to that title, then we became that title. So when that title or position went away, then that's pressure. That's an impression. Right? So if you were a high school athlete and now you're an accountant and you're still talking about 20 years ago that how you were the superstar and won the final game, or you were the cheerleader and a model, but now you're, can't get a modeling job, you have to put on a new title, or then from that title, you're then going to, because you believe that title or don't like that title, then you're going to open up to others to look at you from the way you look at yourself from that title. Make sense? All right, guys. Hopefully this is making sense. If it's not, just leave me a comment below and I'll try to clarify some things. But this is, again, the basics. And if it's even too fast for you, then I'll slow it down. Or if it's too slow, I'll speed it up for you. All right, duration of time. All right, out of one's job title or another. We just talked about that. And then persons resist or adherent to universal upgrades. Who will you be if you are no longer blank, 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 right? So if you're no longer who you are, right? If all your kids are grown up, yes, you're still a mother, but you're an empty nester, or now you got to go back and get a job, or you want to create yourself or reinvent yourself. And then we sort of look around to brand ourselves, right? Especially in the YouTube world, both personal and business have sort of joined each other. In the old days, you had a business brand, and then you had a personal self. But those two worlds have come together. So once you are being your own unique personality, then that builds into a business, and then that business and your personality is the same. So you brand them to be the same. That makes sense? So we have to reestablish, but this is all going to create pressure and impressions. People are going to give us likes or dislikes. Right? They're going to leave us their comments. Those are impressions with our new title. Make sense? So if right now, if you can take away your titles, take away those names, take away the labels from the psychology world or science world or whatever your degrees are, take all those away. Quit calling yourself a doctor, quit calling yourself a nurse, quit calling yourself lawyer. Take these names away, and who are you? Right? What lies underneath is how your energies are communicating. And it's how this communication is attracting other communications and people and places around you. So we've talked about this unfolding moment, right? It's one of the key things of this program is unfolding the moment with an undefended heart, right? So we talked about this earlier today about immediacy. And what is immediacy is that we need to unpack the feelings of this pressure. So if you're in a conversation and immediately you feel the pressure, you stop the conversation politely and say, hey, I'm not understanding you at this point. Can you say it differently? Or I felt that you just cut on me or dissed me. You know, is this my interpretation or is that what you meant? Right? Or we want to unpack it immediately is the point of this pressure that we're feeling, because if we're not sure whose it is, and it could just be your own insecurity popping up in that conversation, because again, we see ourselves in a certain way and that impresses itself upon other people. And if we see ourselves as depressed or lonely or whatever this is, then other people are going to pick up on that subconsciously and then treat you like you're lonely or treat you like you're sick or treat you some other way, meaning that they see you as another title, and then they're going to impress upon you from the title that you're in essence pushing on them. Make sense? So we're going to unpack that feeling and that pressure without using the emotional labels. So for an example, look, I felt that, you know, I feel some animosity, I feel some anger coming from you. Is this my interpretation of yours? And if they say it's not mine, then it's yours. Now they can say and deny that that's theirs, but if you don't know the difference, how do you know who's telling that story? So again, but this is unpacking our stuff. So if you don't know something, the way to unpack what you don't know is start unpacking what you don't know, and then from that conversation, you'll get what you know. All right? So we're going to use descriptions. So if I have a client and they tell me their story, I'm like, well, how do you feel about that? Right? Pretty basic. Right? And then they'll tell me how they feel. Well, as soon as they bring a label, well, I feel depressed. I'm like, okay, take that label away, and what are you? Right? Well, I'm just feeling sad, like there's a cloud over my head. Great, now we're going somewhere. How heavy is this cloud? How big is this cloud? See, now I'm bringing in the neuro-linguistic programming and reframing and rephrasing, right? Or behavioral, cognitive behavioral therapy, all this stuff. And so now I'm beginning to, I have something, so I'm just going to throw it back, right? They said cloud, and I'm going to do is that, well, what kind of a cloud? See, I'm just reframing, rephrasing, because I'm inquiring and I want to know that information, right? I'm deep listening. And so when they tell me, oh, it's a big cloud, and you know, you ever see one of those cartoons where you're walking and there's this rain cloud no matter where you go? Okay, so it's not that big, but it's overhead. How high is it? Right? I'm not trying to challenge them by giving me too many details. What I want them to do is just observe how they're observing the cloud, because the cloud is just a representation of their thoughts and their emotions. And so through the conversation, I can eventually just keep it neutral, and then I can say, well, who's holding the cloud there? And they'll shift uneasy in their chair for a moment, look at me, put their head down in shame or something like that, as they may perceive it. And they're like, well, I am. Oh, well, that's awesome. Well, if you're the one holding the cloud there, are you also the person that can remove that cloud? Well, yeah, I can. Okay, remove the cloud right now. How are you removing that cloud? When you remove the cloud, right, are you just going to blow it away? You're going to wave it goodbye? You're going to tell it to go? What is this form, right? And each thing, I'm not going to get too detailed, but each thing gives me more information about how they collected the cloud in the first place. So when I can help them reframe it, then the way they're describing it, like, well, I can just blow it off. I'm like, okay, what is it that you just need to blow off in your life, right? And so the cloud ends up having names and shapes and dates and events and experiences. And eventually I will ask them, right? Because what we're doing here is getting them to their higher self and empowering them, giving them more power, collecting their ions, questing their ions. That's what all this is about. And then through that, I'm like, well, once the clouds are gone, well, what's there? What remains? Well, the sun, it's shining. Excellent. So how do you feel in this warm, basking glow of the sun? I feel amazing, right? And they figured this out. All they did is just reframe their story, right? So this is what it is about unpacking, just using descriptors, not labels. So the more you can get people away from labels, you can get them to explain the energy in motion, then they can take responsibility for that thought and the action and the emotion or the emoting ions, and they can move or remove that energy, right? So, and in this process, you want them to allow to unpack, just like I said in this example. I told this lady, all right, well, who put the cloud there? I just paused. I'm just going to stay quiet. I'm not going to say another word until they realize and take responsibility and go, aha, it was me. Right? I'm going to give them that space because I'm not nervous or uncomfortable that there's quiet. Because I'm not attached to their story, it's theirs. I want them to feel that, right? I want them to feel that it's them who put it there, and then acknowledge that it's them who can take it away. But I'm going to allow that process to occur, and I'm just going to sit back neutral, right? I'm not going to be distracted. I'm not looking at my watch. I'm not looking outside. I'm just there looking at them. I'm just waiting. And I'm not going to be impatient. I'm just going to be patiently because it's their story, their time, right? They're paying me for that time. So I'm just going to let them take the time they need to unfold and unpack that moment. All right. So again, we talked about that it can be uncomfortable, right, to face their truth, right? That it's them who did it, who put that cloud there to begin with, right? And this all started from a word that they used, depression. And for me, depression is just depressed ions. We're pressing down this cloud on themselves. So if they're doing that, then they can release that cloud. I saw this screen yesterday, and we talked about the listening style, so rote rehearsal and all that good stuff. And we talked about being attentive, so that they seem interested in what you have to say, but not really listening, looking at their watch, or their feet are pointed outward. They may be facing you, but their feet are pointing the other way. They're not really interested in hearing what you have to say because they want to be somewhere else. Unless you can engage them, and all of a sudden if they turn their whole body in front, now they're interested. Now you're creating a rapport with your client. And then we talked about that giving us validation. So how do we give someone validation? Again, we talked about it briefly or superficially yesterday. Today, as you can see, we're diving deeply into this communication. So deep listening, right? We've been talking about that. And then we're acknowledging what's said by either party, right? I want them to hear me as I want to hear them, right? If someone's not willing to meet you in that middle and listen equally, right? I always love to have people come up to my door. In the past, not anymore, I don't have time for it. Someone coming to your door, knocking, and either wanting to sell you something, be it a religion, a magazine, or whatever, and I say, look, I'll give you equal time, right? And I'll listen intently and deeply to what you have to say, as long as I take equal time and you sit here with me and listen to me for 20, 30 minutes, right? Trying to tell me about your product or God or religions or whatever. And most of the time, none of them stay. No one's ever stayed, right? I'm like, I'll be more than happy to talk about this. I'll be more than happy to engage you in your vocabulary, right? Yes, I'm challenging them, but I also want to see if they're genuinely interested in hearing my side. If they're not, then they're not really there to hear my side intently. They're just here to proselytize or get you to buy something, right? So we just need to acknowledge what someone else is saying deeply. And so how do we do this, physically? We just nod genuinely, yeah. Like, I don't need to say I'm hearing you. I can say, without saying that, right? I can just look at them and nod intently. They can see my eyes are deeply into theirs, right? I can reframe what they said. I'm asking questions about what they said. Again, rephrase, reframing. I don't know what they're saying, so I need clarity, right? If you're unclear about what's happening in the relationship, then you don't have clarity. So how do you get it? You need to ask questions. Not mean, not spiteful, right? Not trying to get power over someone else or making them feel guilty. You genuinely want to fix whatever needs repair, all right? And repair is transmitter, receiver, masculine, feminine, and all that good stuff. And then eye contact. Don't just stare deeply into their soul for 30 minutes straight. No, break away. That makes people very nervous, like staring a dog in the face. They'll get aggressive, right, because they feel uncomfortable. We're not there to make anyone feel uncomfortable. All right, so listening and communication styles. Right? So the listening and communication styles, so there's download, factual, empathic, and generative. And these are just general terms that we'll put on them for now. So download is just someone regurgitating what they learned from somebody else and passing it off as their own or making it that it's factual. But they don't have any of their own unique information or insights. They just regurgitate somebody else, right? Lawyers, debaters, their only impression they have or their title that they have is to be this instigator or this inquisitor or this domineering person, right? And then there's factual. So these guys repeat and relies on facts and books, but are disconnected from thinking themselves outwardly. So downloading and factual is sort of basically the same thing. You know, you go to church and they tell you, and then they go out and tell other people about what they learned in church, and this is just regurgitation. It's not individuality. And again, groups and individuality, nothing wrong or right. We just got to make sure that if you're having communication issues, right, even within that group, this will help you. If you're an individual, just want individual conversations, then that'll help you, all right? Or just having a conversation with yourself. So empathetic, right? We talked about the empath. Go back a few videos, early videos, and it's about the path, right? The path and the plan according to that, right? So your path is being empathic, sympathetic, all those pathic words, right? And it's knowledge based on feels, and so you're listening both inward and outwardly that we talked about. I'm feeling you, I'm looking at you, but I'm also internally feeling your impressions. Generative is using intuition, feeling, knowledge gained, and wisdom. The wisdom that connects will and action, right? And this goes to the hierarchy of discipline, knowledge, understanding, awareness, insight, and actuality, or your actual eyes, which is your esoteric eyes. The ones that work off of vibration, not just lenses in your head, right? And why is it that people don't want to face their truth, right, or get to know themselves? Well, we got to first break that word down, truth. Everyone has a different definition of truth, like faith or any of these words or God. They're all different versions off your own internal representation or what you've learned from your tribes and such. So your own perception is through your own eyes. And the eyes is I, me, what can I get from me, with them, what's in it for me, right? We see the world from our eyes and our experience, and we want everyone else to align with us, and when they don't, we have miscommunication again. So if we don't understand where someone else is seeing, if you don't understand where someone else's perception is coming from, then you're just in the I, the egoic I, not the I and thou that we've talked about, the that, right? And the reason is because it doesn't align with one's core value. They don't have core values. They don't have heart values yet. Why? Because they're still defending their heart. They haven't unfolded their moment. They haven't had the urgency or immediacy to state what is in the moment or question what is in the moment. Look, I don't know what you're saying. Can you explain it a different way, please? I appreciate that. Right? And so why are we untruthful? Well, because it keeps us in the past. Why do we want to stay in the past? Because we're afraid of the feelings about the truth about yourself. Because if we are to look at ourselves and the truth about ourselves, then it's not very pretty, right? Because we've covered up and defended and egoically defended our heart. And so everything else is just superficial lies, right? What lies on the surface is just lies. So the truth is ugly for most people and they don't want to deal with it, but we have to learn how to communicate. We have to be open to communicating with ourselves. And so truth can be perceived as ugly, uncomfortable, harsh, right? And it's easier to drug and label your emotions than it is to deal with it, or that's how some people think. But I'm here to show you differently. I'm here to teach you differently. That once you take the labels and the drugs away, right, that don't need to be there. Again, I'm all about the coexistence of both allopathic and alternative medicines, right? I'm not anti anything. If it needs to work, if it is, but I need to make my own cost-benefit analysis, right? I need to make my own risk to reward, right? And that's for me and me alone. No one should be telling me what is best for my body. They can't force something on me if I didn't choose it or I'm not open to it. When these institutions, right, that they want you to pay your hard-earned money to this tuition for their intuition or institutions, right, that they want to tell you what's best for you, that they know what's best for your thoughts, that they know what's best for your mind, for your heart, your relationships, right? Everyone's got their unique things and we can share our uniqueness, but it doesn't mean that I know anything about any of y'all's relationships or how you perceive them or your truths or your gods, right? I can only tell you and educate you about what I'm doing in my life. It doesn't mean my stuff's right or wrong. It's just my way of perceiving life. So anyway, it's easier just to pop a pill and make it go away for a couple hours, or throw some drink down you and forget about it. But when you wake up in the morning, it's just going to be right there waiting for you. So none of these superficial topical things are ever going to take away what it is you're feeling. Right? It's because you haven't owned that problem yet. Right? You haven't solved that issue yet. Right? So when you're ready to own that issue that you're drinking and drugging or ignoring or putting off on other people, blame and fault and all that good stuff, when you're ready for it, then you'll start having a dialogue with yourself, and then you'll meet your truth. Right? Then you can live authentically. And the core values goes along with the reason why these people aren't willing to face themselves or face their own truths or deal with it or get off the drugs and the labels is because they don't have a life strategy. Now, I'm not going to go in deep to this right now because this video is already long and I'm already breaking it up into 3 of them, but a life strategy is setting steps or a path, right? Create the path. You're the creator. Create your own path. Take responsibility for your actions and your steps. Because at this point, the person doesn't have any understanding of awareness of themselves. And so, again, this goes back to their core values. What do they value? How do they evaluate themselves? How do they evaluate the ions? Evaluation, value the ions. So how are they open to seeing and feeling, right? Energy is just through feeling. There are no words. You feel something first, then we add the words later. If you're a deaf mute, right, you're still going to feel something, then you're going to sign it or write it or do whatever. But everyone feels something first. Energy is empathic, right? It's in waveform because it's electrical, and so you feel that wavelength, that waveform, that pressure hit you. Then your own stimulus or your own system is going to look at that stimulus and then go, "Oh, this is associated," and you're going to go back to the past or your labels, right? And go, "Oh, this is anger because that's how I felt last time." But we can always re-perceive what that feeling is, and it could have just been frustration or lack of understanding. And then if we understand what that is, then we can go forward or onward, right? So they don't know who they are. And that was one of the first classes we talked about is who are you? What are you? Where are you? How are you? Right? It's based on the identification of emotional labels, titles, titles, occupation, or people. Occupation is just occupying the ion. So, based on the identification, how are we identifying our ions? Who are we? So this is all reflective work. This is the stage we're at within the universal divine circuit and the realms of expanding consciousness. So we got to look at these labels. You're not your label. You're not even your flesh bag. Right? If you're not this flesh bag, if you weren't white, black, red, yellow, male, female, whatever titles, whatever labels you're putting in, take away all these labels, and what are you? And when you start operating from that position, positing your ions in that form, from that thought, then you have clarity. You don't have confusion anymore. You're not fused with someone else's system. You know exactly who you are. You don't need to answer to anyone other than yourself. All right, guys, that'll end it for today. I know that went a little long. I should have broken that up. Maybe I still will break it up in a couple more pieces, but that's what it is today. I appreciate you. Hopefully, I was able to communicate some clarity to you about how to communicate. right? And it's all having to do with ions. It's all having to do with esoteric, about bringing the energy in the order and understanding the order in which it comes in, because you need to understand how you transmitted it in order to receive it, right? So no one's sick, no one's broke. Yes, we have medical terms for these things, but in the esoteric realm, none of us are broke. We're just energy in motion, and sometimes we get a little off-centered, out of neutral, and then we have the ability to tonify or sedate or expand or collapse, but these aren't negative or positives. They're not blames or fault. It's part of electricity. It's about the movement of electricity. All right? So hopefully this was, review this video a few times, take notes, whatever you need to. Leave me a comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, guys. I'm trying to get those subscriptions, so algorithm loves the like, so poke the heck out of that like button, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.